Well, my lords, I shall try not to turn this into the Oxford Union, but the noble Lord, Lord Young of Norwood Green, did put some direct questions to me, and in responding to the debate I'll also provide some answers to those. And I do think his comments about lifestyle change are really quite insulting to the people who are struggling so hard that food banks are having to make up parcels of no-cook food because they simply can't afford to cook that food. And the noble lord said that, some people around him are investing in their homes. Of course, we're talking about the cost of living crisis. There are in very large communities where very few people have any money at all to maintain their homes, let alone invest in them. However, I will agree with the noble lord that we can't do it all with renewables. And indeed, the very powerful and informative speech of the noble Lady Baroness Scott of Needham Market covered that very well. The cleanest, greenest energy is the energy we don't have to use. And we have an absolutely disastrous quality of housing stock. And saving energy is the other side of using renewables. So I will go back to where I was planning to start, which is by thanking the noble Lord Whitty for securing this debate and, as many others have, congratulating him on his extremely good timing. Because what we're seeing today is pretty well the rest of the country following where the Green Party has led. Back in the autumn, in the autumn of 2021, we called for a payment to every household of £320, a winter fuel payment to help through the winter. And voila, today we have a payment to most households of £350. Now, I will pick up the point made by a noble lord previously, however, about the fact that a lot of this is expected to effectively be paid back. It's a debt. And we have households who are enormously laden with debt already, households who are using debt to pay their grocery bills because they simply don't have the money, and the government is effectively putting more debt on them. So there's a very large question to be asked about the process. Now, I talked about what we were saying in autumn 2021. We called then for a temporary cut on VAT on domestic energy bills, which I believe may have been a Boris Johnson promise in 2018. And Her Majesty's opposition, I believe, is now calling for that. And also in autumn 2021, we called for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, which I understand is also now Labor policy. And I think, again, as the noble Lady Baroness Scott made very clear, it is obviously the time for that windfall tax on oil and gas companies. I quote a headline from yesterday's Financial Times, quote, "Big oil groups retain swagger with biggest profits in years," close quote. In the climate emergency, the last thing we need is fossil fuel companies swaggering around the world, using their windfall profits to seek out even more oil and gas fields, building even further the carbon bubble, a huge threat to our financial security, as well as our fragile, overheated planet. And coming back to the noble Lord Young's comment about fracking, well, that's creating a new industry when you're going to have to immediately shut it down makes no sense at all. And no, we shouldn't be shipping the LNG, but we're doing that because we didn't invest in home energy efficiency before, or renewables. But the motion refers to the role of the consumer protection regulatory regime in energy markets. And I want to focus on that for my final period, and particularly what that regime can't do. The fact is that while we rely on gas, we are going to be at the mercy of world markets, even without the other environmental considerations about using that gas. And I'm going to cut down what I said on this because the noble Lady Baroness Scott has already covered this so well. But we are now building homes today. People will be picking up their keys today for new homes that immediately need to be retrofitted, both for environmental reasons, but also so they can afford to live in those homes. And that is an absolute disgrace and a huge government failure. And there's also renewables. I was talking about oil and gas profits. How much better if people in the more prosperous communities that the noble Lord Young was referring to were able to invest in community energy schemes, put solar panels and local wind turbines up, fuel schools, doctors' surgeries, factories, homes through that. And yet I keep asking the noble Lord the Minister, where's the funding for that? Where's the plan for that was promised last June? And I did indeed get a written answer to this question, which was pointing to a little bit of money going to farms. That's the only thing the Noble Lord could point me to. But I also want to look at the structural issue of privatisation. And the Noble Lady Baroness Mackintosh of Pickering said competition is not working. And the Noble Lord Whitty, in his introduction, spoke about the absolute mess of the privatised utilities. Now, the last figure I've been able to find, and I'd be interested if the Noble Lord the Minister could update me on this, that is from November, and the cost of the collapse of those privatised energy companies back then was £3.2 billion, which is £120 for each household. That's the cost of ideology. That's going on to those heavily indebted, struggling households. That's, if we could just run these essential services, our energy companies, our water companies, if we ran these systems for public good, not private profit, then we could take some of the pressure off our heavily indebted households.
Lords, I thank the Noble